Large cappuccino. Orders up.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Athlete Cafe. I'm here with a very special guest today. It's been, I feel like, a long time coming. We've talked about having you on this podcast for a while, but it's just hard to get you over here.
Yeah.
You're busy, very busy schedule. So we have Ryan Harrington here, who is the owner of Sharpen Skills Training, the man who started the whole thing. And, as Ryan and I put together kind of what we wanted to talk about today, I felt it was important to bring him here just to get him on an episode to kind of just share a little bit of his perspective from just like the role he plays at our company, but also just like what he's learned a lot through mental performance, because he's also a parent of 4 kids. So he's seen things in a different role than like me and the rest of the mental performance coaches have, just because none of us have kids quite yet. So he's done a great job of just managing over us and growing a pretty successful business from my understanding.
Absolutely. Yes.
Ryan's run a couple of different businesses, so he has more insight onto that. And I just always think like Ryan was the guy that I met to start the whole mental performance piece of this business. And, I always said when I was in grad school that I have all the counseling background, I have all the athlete experience, I just don't know anything about business, and I would need somebody with business knowledge to kind of start something like what I wanted to do, and walked Ryan. So it was a very cool moment, and I think it was meant to be the way that it happened. And it's been really cool just to be aside him for the past 4 years now.
Yeah.
3 years for real, but a little over 3 years. Building this business.
Right? Mm-hmm. Right during COVID.
Yep, right during COVID.
Fun times.
So I guess, Ryan, why don't you give kind of like a brief background of yourself and just your role in this business?
Yeah, sure. So, in owning the company, I oversee the mental performance division and the physical performance division and the facility. We have a 30,000 square foot facility that we house for, different sports, and, worked through building the facility through COVID and developing first the physical side and then the mental side, with getting in touch with Emily and, taking something that was really an idea and, applying it and figuring out a way to build that business really exponentially through the people that we have work for the organization. I think the people really drive, the organization on both sides. And I've just been very blessed to be able to be put in contact with a lot of successful people, a lot of great athletes, and people that are hardworking every day and really working to get the athletes that they work with to be their best, if that's fair.
Yeah.
So, as we probably talked about on this podcast, expansion out west into Reno, Nevada, developing more of a video set, for parents and for coaches and for athletes. Those are kind of the things that are upcoming. And, taking, it's interesting, there's not really like a class for coaching or parenting at the youth level, right? You learn as you go. And fortunately, I have 4 kids, so, made all my mistakes with my oldest and then try to do better with each one. There's a interesting parallel that I heard once about parenting where, your first child, it's like building a community, right? So you got to build a road, so you have to clear the forest. So you got to rip out the forest, rip out the stumps, get the dirt ready. That's kind of your first child. Those are the hardest parts. And then you got to build the road, which is hard, right? So you're building the road, and then the last of the kids, whether it's your 3rd kid or your 4th kid, they just walk down the road, right? So I found that parenting and coaching and business is a lot like that. Just through experience, you learn to get better at things. And, it's, I think, regardless of the position, because it sounds like maybe it was harder for my oldest son, but I think it helped really form him to be who he is today, which is a pretty successful person that's, getting ready to go to college and, played multiple sports through high school and is a pretty well-grounded Christian Catholic kid. So very proud of him, as well as my other kids. I don't want to tout them too much during this because that's not really why I'm here. But I think learning through coaching with my kids and with the other athletes has been a pretty cool journey for me, and how I've transitioned as a coach, as an athletic director, as a business owner to, try to improve the best I can through every season, right, across the board.
Right. And I always joke that I always say Ryan's lived like 12 different lives and because he has just so many different hats and just so many different avenues that you've chosen to go down, whether it is coaching, parenting. I mean, you were in a completely different industry before you got into mental performance coaching.
A few different industries,
and physical training. So it's like just seeing the experience that you bring to that, but also it's just, I always think it's so cool to see how you've taken the mental performance side, what you've learned from me and from all the employees that we've hired through this business, of like how you've really taken it and applied it to your own life. Like you really believe what you preach and kind of what you sell, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it was probably a hard lesson for me to learn that the way I was handling the athletes that I coached and my own kids was really wrong. It was more geared towards winning. It was more geared towards, feeding my own ego about winning, right? And had to make some big transitions as I learned from Emily and her team about really the right way to coach and how to nurture those relationships, looking at things more tactically versus emotionally. Like I spent a lot of time trying to motivate kids. You have a lot of coaches do, especially in football. This is, the worst part of youth football is every coach has a Lombardi speech for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and they go around in a circle, right? And I'm sure anybody that's watching this that is either a youth athlete for football or a parent has heard the speech, right? And that it doesn't really resonate. Like there's some kids that are motivated, there's some kids that are not. And really your job there is to teach them the game and to show passion, but not to try to force it down their throats or turn into something negative where you have an expectation. It's just unrealistic for the athlete or the team, right? The team wants it, they're going to figure it out. If they don't and they just want to play for fun, that's okay too. So I think having those shifts in how I viewed coaching and realizing some of the mistakes that I was making was hard, right? It's always hard to self-assess and realize that you're doing something wrong, but I was fortunate enough to, do research on my own, learn some of the, mental performance tactics that are, that are out there, right? And was really helped down a path of learning, and not just through our group. I mean, through CYO, through Adobe Mosier, who runs it. He taught me a lot about, how to approach coaching in a different mindset, and just realizing that, they are who they are where they're at, right? So you can't make a 7th grader into a 10th grader, right? And thinking you're preparing a 7th grader for 10th grade and 7th grade is just not reality. You're preparing them in the moment, right, of where they are in 7th grade and trying to give them the experience that they need to be their best. I think and I fell into this trap, with some of my kids and some of the athletes of, you just want your kid to play up. They play up. They're really good, right? Oh my gosh, they're so good. They're a 5th grade kid. They could play with 7th graders. That's so amazing. Well, that can be challenging sometimes because, what if that 5th grader, when he plays up or she plays up, doesn't do as well, and it starts to affect their confidence, or they play up for a little while, they go back down, and maybe they don't play as well, or puberty is such a huge piece of it, where they're at physically, sometimes just leaving them where they are because there's so many changes in their body, in their mind, and even though they might look like or play like a 7th grader, they still have the mind of a 5th grader, right? And that could be a 5th grader that just turned a 5th grader or is going into 6th grade. Even that year can be a big difference. And I think I learned a lot of that just coaching 7th and 8th grade football, seeing a 7th grader versus an 8th grader, and just the physical development that the athlete has, the mental development that they have, and where they are in both arenas is just so different from one grade. To expect a kid to be able to play up, even if they physically can do it, it's just, and sometimes it works, right? Sometimes the kids go and they thrive in those situations, and it's great, but it can backfire, and it just puts a lot of expectation on the kid, and then if they don't do well, then you start blaming yourself, right, as a parent. And you start second guessing yourself. When you start second guessing yourself as a parent, and now you're tying how you feel you are as a parent to your son or daughter's athletic ability, now you're on a slippery slope, right? Because, one does not go with the other. A good athlete does not make a good kid, and an athlete that's challenged does not make it a bad kid. And I think sometimes there's parenting out there that feels like their kid needs to be the best in certain age groups and they just don't, and I think you and I in the mental performance group have seen enough high-level athletes to know they're high-level athletes because they want to be high-level athletes, and they have some genetic or physical gifts that other people don't. You could be the greatest shooter in the world and be 5'5", and if you go against somebody that's 6'8", or take volleyball, for sure, there's a height element to it. So there's just so many challenges there, but it's fascinating to me, and the things that I've learned from this journey has been so cool for me because I've been able to really learn, which is pretty cool. You learn how athletes think, how great athletes think, what the time is that they put into it. And not that you're going to go mimic that with your kid or with the people that you coach, but just kind of cool to see, I mean, we had a kid I remember from the Midwest somewhere that he's getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and taking 1,000 shots for basketball every morning. No one's telling him to do that. That's what he wanted to do, and was still having struggles mentally, and we were able to help him work through that. But, seeing that kind of dedication is pretty cool because it's very few that are like that.
Well, I think you also bring an interesting piece to this because you did play collegiate football,
For a little while.
For a little while. But nonetheless, I mean, football was such a big part of your life. So I know you've talked about just that coaching piece of it. And I think that's a big struggle too of like taking what you maybe did and now seeing that with your kids or with the group that you're coaching, like that has been, I think, a huge shift that you've made too of like you can't force anything. No. Even if you wanted to do things or you saw things that worked or whatever was for you. I mean, you were always the taller one. You kind of got some positions out of that you've talked about.
Yeah.
So I think like to me, that's always been an interesting take that you've had too.
Well, you talk about desire to play a sport. So I didn't play much football as a youth. The town that I lived in didn't have a very large program, but they had high school. And, my parents basically, especially my mother, forbade me from playing football. So I forged her name and went and played. And she was a working mom. She didn't know. She didn't find out till the end of the season. And she was not happy. And, typical Irish Catholic mother from Boston. Yeah, very different. There was no online Google form that you clicked on through email. But once she realized that I was passionate about it, she encouraged it, and she realized it was keeping me out of trouble. And I found a passion, and there was just no way I was not going to do that. So, that definitely helps me realize that when you look at athletes, why are they really there? Are they there for themselves or are they there for somebody else? And, or a little of both, right? It's not a definitive line. I will say too that, the great thing about sports is it can be very humbling in certain situations. You can look incredibly dominant, and then in other ones, around even a little bit of better talent can be a lot harder. So it's an interesting perspective, to see all those different sides. But yeah, for sure, that journey with football was pretty cool for me, and I got to play, part of college, semi-pro. I got to coach at the youth level, and have really enjoyed it. I mean, it's hard sometimes, but easy is not always good. Sometimes hard is good. So
yeah, the challenge. But I think just even in this role and just like I said, with coaching and even in the mental performance side, I mean, so like if any of our listeners have had services with us or have looked at our website or seen anything, if you do an intro call, Ryan is the one that you're talking to.
Yeah.
It's probably the first time we're seeing his face anywhere because he has not taken a picture to put on the website.
I know I gotta do that, right?
Doesn't put anything anywhere. So he's the one that you're talking to. And I think he just makes, like we've always said you fit that role really well just because you have that parent connection and you have that experience to not only coaching your kids, but playing the sports and doing all of that at a high level. And I think it's just really cool even to hear just the conversations you have and how you've evolved with just talking with those parents and kind of prefacing what we do and how we help and how we can be best helpful. Yeah,
learning to just, the volunteer athletic director position, it brought me into a whole nother realm around parents and athletes, which generally is good. It has challenges for sure, but, learning where parents are coming from and where their heads are at and what their expectations are of their kids and how it doesn't always correlate. The parents that are the most passionate don't always have the best athletes, and sometimes parents that don't even care sometimes have athletes that are amazing, right? And sometimes it's the other way, right? Sometimes they're passionate, the kids are passionate. It's I just think it's such an interesting interaction with sports, parents and families, right? And how people handle different situations and how, I talk to this, a lot about the athlete with the parent, right? So you could have an athlete that has a mom or dad that's standing on the fence screaming at their kid. And sometimes the kid responds to it and sometimes they don't, right? Or you could have a parent that sits in the back, doesn't say one word the whole game, and, can have an effect on the athlete even though they're saying absolutely nothing, right? And a lot of that's driven by the human mind of the athlete, right? It's what they're thinking, right? So understanding where that athlete is thinking and then being able to communicate to the parent how they're feeling is a big thing that we work on. And it's a lot of times I hear about that challenge. They get in the car after the game, the favorite place for everybody. And the classic question, what happened? Or how did you think you played?
Why'd you do that?
Why did you do that? Or, you played really well, but, and, different kids respond to that differently. And a lot of times their answer is, I don't know. And it's because they really don't. Their mind's not developed enough. They just played in a really challenging situation. So, they're gassed, right? They're tired. So teaching the athlete how to communicate to the parent respectfully, to be able to communicate to them how they're feeling. And it might not, the answer can be, I haven't had any food, I'm hungry, let me eat, and then I can communicate how I feel, is an appropriate answer. And it's a appropriate boundary. It's giving them time to process, but it's also giving the parent what they want because they want to hear something. And I don't know is very hard as a parent. I've lived through this, right? When you get in the car and they're just like, I don't know. It's like, how the heck can you not know, right? And I think too, and especially in the middle school space, the athlete in that age, and I'm not a child psychologist, so this is just my opinion, right? Take it for what it's worth. But like a lot of times they get confused to the point where I remember there was a kid on our football team, and let's just say his name was Larry, because there's no way his name is Larry, because no one names our kid Larry anymore. But let's just say his name was Larry, and I say, hey, Larry, come over here. And he's the only Larry on the team. And he says, who, me? So he's so confused. He doesn't even know his own name. He has to think about that. And that kind of, like, the initial response that I would have is sarcasm, which is inappropriate, of, no, the other Larry, right? Which is completely inappropriate. But really understanding that the kid is just really confused because a lot's going on, right? Equipment, the play, the weather, right? It might be hot or cold, fear of failure, slowing it down for them and saying, yeah, I want to talk to you about this specific situation, and giving them more communication. I mean, I had to learn that, and it was hard, because it's not the generation I grew up in. It's very different now, but also the stakes and the situation is different. My dad never yelled at me about sports ever. He was amazed that I was playing football and didn't have a job and getting paid after school for high school. So I never felt that pressure, but now it's very different. And there's a money aspect that everybody feels. There's a expectation to keep up with the other athletes. The athlete and the parent feels. So trying to regulate all that. We help with that. From the athlete perspective, right? Because a lot of times you think about a 12 or 13-year-old kid. What do they really know about money? So when you say, do you know how much I'm paying for this? Volleyball clinic. Well, they probably don't know. No. They have no idea. And if you told them it was $500, they don't even really know what $500 is. Right. So, trying to meet them where they're at and understanding it and communicating it and trying to drive them to the right direction of how they're going to feel their best is kind of what we're trying to push them towards,
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think too, it's just important. I think the fact that you have that communication with the parent, I think you do a really great job of kind of explaining that. It's more about helping the kid communicate versus us as mental performance coaches going over and saying things. Obviously, we communicate with the parents, but we try and encourage that development for them. And I think you do a great job of just
Well, that's a question I get is how are we going to measure success? Right? Yeah. How do you measure success in sports psychology? Well, one big aspect of it is that your kid starts talking to you, right. And that we're teaching them how to communicate more effectively. And that's not super tangible, but you see the difference. I saw it in my kids. I mean, my two older kids went through this program, and for sure it was life-changing for myself and my son in our relationship, like being able to communicate more effectively and understanding where he was at, the pressure he was putting on himself that I didn't even realize until, well after, the situations that he was putting that pressure on, for sure it's a big deal, and the parents have to understand that. it's not as easy as, I was going to go out and throw 5 touchdowns. That's not what we're going for. It's more, if you feel like your communication is improving with your kid, then we're probably going in the right direction, But yeah, there should be, and communication from us as well, kind of what they're learning from a visualization standpoint, imagery, dealing with challenges, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think you talk about a lot, and I mean, again, it goes back to the fact that we don't have kids of our own, most of us here. You've brought up a lot about just the family dynamic and how, some, like all of your kids are different in their athletic abilities and just different people in general.
Very different.
And you've talked about just how you try not to kind of pit one against the other. You make it more of a family piece.
Yeah. So like, we have, some of our kids are, where they're at now, right? So I have kids at different ages. So who knows? I have one son that just turned 18, right? So I can't really even compare my other children because they're younger, right? So, but more so when they have success, explaining to the other kids how they were part of that, right? So one of my sons who's younger, plays hockey, right? It's a physical sport. Well, when he does well, I tell my older son, when you wrestle with him and joke around, that teaches him not to be afraid of contact, right? And it's just, you're not doing it on purpose, but it's just something that's, you're helping with that. Or the communication that my daughter might have with my other daughter as far as like how to handle situations when she's nervous, because my youngest daughter gets a little nervous sometimes, and just saying, hey, I feel that way too sometimes and it's okay. It's like constantly trying to get the kids to build each other up and realizing that they're all part of the package. Like as a family, we're all working together to be our best in sports and out of sports, right? We're all together as a family. And do they get along perfectly? Absolutely not. They fight, they argue, they goof around. I mean, my 2 sons have turned into like the Smothers Brothers, where they're just like constantly, it's like they're in on a joke that nobody knows about and everybody else is looking at them like, what's wrong with those two in public, which can be challenging. But I think that ability for them to connect, or if they're not connecting, they can realize it and separate. We're trying to teach that. And not that I'm the perfect parent. I mean,
no.
I'm not. I've made a ton of mistakes and could probably spend a whole hour on a podcast of dumb things that I've done as a parent. But for sure, it's like we're just working towards a common goal. And a lot of that is around, faith and family, for sure. Faith first.
Yeah. So I think but just between all of those things, it's been so fun, working alongside you. And I feel like I've grown a ton just being around you and your business knowledge and everything like that. And I think, I don't know, is there any other pieces that you feel like is important to kind of share just with what you've experienced while at Sharpen? Or
I think the most important thing that I've been able to watch is, because I'm significantly older than everybody else in the company, is just watching the development of the employees, right? So a lot of times they come in, they fresh out of college, right, and trying to find their way. And not that I'm showing them the way, but more so as a team collectively we're growing, right? And I think that starts with our upper management, with you and Alexis, and trickles all the way down to, Abby, who's our new manager, and the rest of the employees, where, we're all growing together. Is it always perfect? Absolutely not. Is every hire been perfect? Absolutely not. But for sure, I feel like to watch the development of just human beings in general is just pretty cool to me. And the impact that I see that our employees have on athletes is amazing, and I'm not plugging that as a business owner, our company's so great. It's more, it's tangible, it's real, the reviews are real. And when you have an athlete that wants to get better and you're working with our organization and our team, because it really is a team effort, right? There's a lot of collaboration that goes on behind the scenes outside of the one-on-ones or the team, the sports team stuff. You're going to have a really good experience, because everybody wants success and they're all working hard towards it in a positive atmosphere. And, they all see it. And I see the impact just the way the sports psychologists talk about their interactions, or the information that you tell me about the sports psychologist interactions. It's amazing to me. It's funny. You go 52 years through life, and and you find the most gratification out of all of it is right now, and it's pretty cool. I don't think that everybody that's my age feels that way, and a lot of that's a testament to the employees. It's been a really cool ride the last 4 years. It's definitely 4 years. It's definitely not easy, right? It's been hard, but lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but for sure, it's been a very, very cool ride. I enjoy every day. I drive, like I tell you, say it all the time, I drive faster to work every day because I love coming into work.
Yeah. No, I think that's, to me, the coolest part. I say you live 12 lives, but to see you doing this, like at this point in your life, like sometimes I know I get stressed just being the 28-year-old person that I am, of like, oh my gosh, what is life? And where am I going to be in 5 years? And what am I doing? And it's just like, I think it's been cool to have you be in the position that you are in at your age with us, to be able to show like there is so much that can change, but it's going to get you to where you want to be. And it's going to get you to a point where you're in your 50s and you're doing something that might be one of the favorite times and parts of your life.
Absolutely.
Which I feel very grateful to be a part of. But just hopefully for anyone listening from that perspective, it kind of gives you some, hopefully, calmness of like, you don't have to have it all figured out right now. And
I still don't have it figured out.
No, I don't. I'm slowly learning that.
I got a lot of lives to live.
Yeah. A lot more to live, I'm sure.
Right.
But hopefully, I mean, any other things that I know, I kind of had a list here of things to talk through, but I mean, any other tidbits of info, or just, I feel like you're a very knowledgeable person to have around.
Yeah, I mean, love your kids.
Yeah.
At any level, right? You just love your kids. Everything else will get figured out.
Let them be what they are. Let them be part of what they're passionate about. Forcing them to do things is probably never going to end up very well.
Nope.
Support what they're good at and what they love to do, and kind of try and put your own pride aside sometimes to let that be what it needs to be.
Yeah.
What I've kind of learned. Well, cool. Well, hopefully just from like a parent perspective, a coach perspective, all of that, I feel like you touched on a few different areas of things. So definitely hope it was just knowledgeable, something to take and sit with and process. And I'm sure there's probably many more podcasts we could do with different things to pick your brain about. But
yeah. I'd love to come back.
Yeah. Cool.
It's been beneficial for me too. I've enjoyed it.
Good. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, Ryan, for coming on and joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for starting this business so that we could even be here today recording a podcast.
I'm very glad that I did.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will see you guys next time. If you like what you're listening to, be sure to follow the Athlete Cafe on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. You can find us wherever you enjoy listening to your podcasts.